Well, good morning, good evening, or good night, depending on where everybody is in the world today. And first of all, to those who are watching live, apologies that we're running a little bit late. And thank you so much for waiting for us. We both had some technical difficulties this morning with our laptops and whatnot. And quite graciously, though, Helen pointed out that when it comes to technology, there's nothing much you can do. You just got to roll with it. But we are here now and very excited for this discussion. So, Helen, welcome and thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, Stefan. Yeah, good to be here. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very windy, blustery day out there, but it's
All
nice and
right.
cozy in here.
Lovely, lovely. You're heading into autumn now, aren't you? Or you're already in autumn?
We are in autumn, yeah, because it was the equinox last week, wasn't it? Yes.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
The days are
And
definitely getting a lot shorter.
we literally just realized today how we're heading into spring so beautifully here because the trees that dropped all their leaves are starting to sprout again and the
Mm,
birds are making their nests, and it's wonderful to just see the seasons change and how despite
it is.
everything that goes on in the world, life still finds a way and still carries on. So here we are.
Exactly. Yeah, I love the autumn too, with the colours and the leaves, when the leaves start to change. And
Mm.
you can see, especially it's been so windy, you can see now the leaves are starting to fall off the trees and
Oh,
starting to
stunning.
change. And it's kind of like when the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, it's getting darker, and you kind of go into that hibernation mode, and you just want to slow down. And I think that's really
Yes.
important, that to go, like you were saying, like with the technology, it's like you go with it, don't you? And I think that because we live in such a fast-paced society, we've got electricity 24/7, we can have lights on all the time, that it's really important that we stay in touch with the
Mm.
seasons and the changes, because we're all part of nature anyway, and if we don't, then it affects us, doesn't it? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
mm,
But we are obviously here to talk to you about your experience that you just had. And I see Priscilla has joined us. Hi, Priscilla. Lovely to have you with us today. And you're just in time. Helen's about to share with us the wonderful experience that she's had at her retreat as we continue this discussion around meditation and food. So maybe I'd like to just kick us off a little bit with how it was going back into a retreat like that after having been out in well everything that's been around us.
yeah, well, I'm very familiar with the retreat centre, because I go and volunteer there. I mentioned this on our last talk. I go and cook, where I might sneeze in a bit.
No worries.
And so, oh, sorry. Oh, my hay fever's come back the last couple of weeks as well. I don't know what that's all about, but anyway, yeah. So it's very familiar there. So it was like going home. I know it very well. But of course, every time you go, there's everything changes. Doesn't it? There's been a few changes. They've, like, for example, they'd upgraded the the fire alarm system, and one night the fire alarm went off in the middle of the night, because there were lots of crane flies, daddy long legs around. It's at that time of year, and I think the sensor was too sensitive, and it set off the sensor. So we were all standing outside, and it was the night of the full moon as well. So we were all standing outside. It was a clear night under the full moon, in our sleep gear and our pajamas and night dresses, and under the full moon, while they sorted the fire alarm out. So, but it's like one of those things. It's like, because when I heard it, and I kind of thought it was my alarm. I think, why's my alarm going off? Why did I set an alarm? You're still half asleep and in that dream
Right.
world. And then I realised, oh no, I think it's the fire alarm. So, oh, what do I need to do? And then you've got to kind of like wake up and get back into that cognitive mode of being practical, thinking, well, remembering where we have to gather. So that, but it was also quite a bonding experience as well, because it was all women staying in the house, and there were a couple of men on the retreat, but they were staying, like, they've got like a couple of like huts outside, and they were staying in those, so they didn't hear the fire alarm. So it was felt very like sisterhood coming together, and under the full moon as well. So it was, in a way, it was quite magical. And yes, and of course there are other sort of some of the things in place because of the pandemic. They're still not
Mm-hmm.
small numbers, so it was very small in numbers. There were only half the usual amount of people there, so there were only 12 of us all together, and that was really nice because you just I mean, obviously it's not viable for them to keep running retreats at those numbers because obviously it wouldn't cover their costs, but it was very special because it was such a small number, so you felt like you got to know everybody, and you were going on this journey together, because the sort of topic of the retreat was called the Path of Transformation, and it was all about the different stages of alchemy, and it was linked into, I can't remember what you call them now, something in Buddhism, about 4 things. I can't remember what they call them, but yeah, but with the alchemy, with going through I mean, you can change the order of the colours, but we did the white, then the red, then the black, when everything, which is like your spiritual death, when everything dies, and then the yellow, which is like the gold, and then you've transformed into the gold. So that was quite a nice sort of to be going on that process together and seeing what stuff came up, because it always does when you're on a retreat, because you've got no phones, no internet, no distractions, so you're there, and you're meditating or going, I'm spending quite a lot of time in nature as well, because we were blessed. I think one day it rained, but apart from that, we had really beautiful weather. And where the retreat centre is, there's lovely grounds, there's lots of woods, and so some afternoons I just went and sat in the woods and it was just being around the trees, because I live by the sea. There's not so many trees around here, so I don't always go to the woods that often, so that was nice as well. Not there's anything with the beach, just being in nature, but it's a different kind of nature. So and when I left on Friday, as anybody in the UK will know, well, I didn't know, because it's always interesting, because we're saying this, it's like you don't know what's been going on sort of out there in the muggle world, as you call it, like you're in Hogwarts, in your very magical world. And of course, because it was quite surreal, one afternoon I was sitting in the woods, and in the distance I could hear, it was obviously maybe a workman or something who got his radio on, and it wasn't loud enough for me to hear what they were saying, but I could tell it was radio too, and it was just that kind of familiar noise in the background, and a reminder that there's still a world out there, and the cars going by and things like that. And when we left on Friday, I gave somebody a lift to the bus station, and we saw a queue of traffic. She said, "Oh, I think they're queuing for the petrol station." Okay, whatever. And as I drove home, I saw a few petrol stations where there were queues of traffic, not knowing what was going on, because I didn't put my radio on in the car, because that kind of feels a bit jarring sometimes. You want to sort of ease out of it before you sort of face, because all these strong energies, and often quite negative and fearful energies as well, that you still feel you need to protect yourself from those a bit as well. And so I stopped off at the supermarket, because obviously having been away for a week, I needed to buy some food, and there was a queue going all the way around the edge of the car park into the petrol station. So as I entered the car park, there was somebody standing by the entrance, one of the workers, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Oh, the world's gone tonto again, because the government had announced there may be a petrol shortage." And apparently what it was, that one of the petrol companies have got a problem with some of its delivery drivers, and so it was nothing to do with the fuel supply at all, but it's kind of that going into that panic mode, people just reacting. And what was really interesting, because of course you've been meditating for a week and you've been looking at your stuff, and that's why we meditate. I talked a bit about this last time. You become more aware of your own conditioning, your thought patterns, how you respond or react to certain situations. And obviously there was such a massive queue. I thought, I'm not joining that queue, because I looked at my petrol gauge. It was just over a quarter full. So I normally fill up when it gets around about a quarter. And as I was driving home, the petrol station near where I live, there was only a little queue of maybe about 5 or 6 cars, and I could feel almost physically like that draw and that sort of like anxiety. Oh, I need to get some petrol. And then I'm thinking, well, no, because one, if they weren't doing this, I wouldn't have bought it anyway, because I'm not going very far in the next few days, and I've got enough if I need to go to the supermarket and go and do a bit of shopping. Or if not, if there isn't any petrol, I can always walk into town and just do a bit of shopping or get the train or the bus. So, and also knowing that if I do that and I go and join that queue, then I'm becoming part of the problem. And I think that's what a lot of people don't recognise. And I say that about, you know, I used to say this when I was talking to teachers, because they would be blaming all their problems on the government and the head teachers and senior management and stuff. And I said, it's like sitting in a traffic jam. You know, if you're in it, you can't complain about the traffic because you're part of the problem. And so it's like recognising that when you're contributing to it. And I'm thinking, well, if I go and buy fuel, and if there is a fuel shortage, because at that point I didn't really know what the truth was, it's like, well, there's people that need it more than me, like emergency services and buses and, you know, people, that delivery drivers and things like that. I don't really need it as much as they do. I can manage without. So it's like, you know, and people say, oh, I've got to get to work. And I'm thinking, well, there are other ways of getting to work. You can cycle, get public transport. And I think we just get into that mode that, oh, we get into that state. And this is just one example that, oh, there's only one way of doing things. And we don't look for creative solutions. And like with the technology or whatever, it's like, well, sometimes you just have to say, well, we're going to be a few minutes late. And it's just like, well, there's no point in getting upset or angry about it, because we're then putting that energy out there, and we don't want to be doing that, because there's some, you know, that's what happens with technology. You know, you disappeared, I don't know where you went, and I was thinking, oh well, I'm sure he'll be back. And I noticed actually when you started recording, it was 11:11, so there you go. There was obviously a higher reason for all this.
Absolutely. And I think, I like to think that the higher reason is quite possibly just so that we can all take a moment to be present, which is what you were demonstrating. Because, and we'll come back to the main topic in a bit, but I just wanted to say that, you know, to a smaller extent, this whole fuel shortage in the UK at the moment, because I saw on the news this morning briefly, it's apparently getting a little bit worse now. But what I find so interesting is, like you say, it's this constant fear push. And then because of that, people literally start to panic. And when you're in panic, you're in fight or flight mode. And when you're in fight or flight, you are unable to make rational decisions, like what you did. You know, you went, well, no, I don't actually need fuel, you know, because you weren't bought into the panic. You weren't bought into that fight or flight. And as a result, you're able to turn around and go, well, actually, I'm going to be all right. And if I need to get to the store and I'm out of petrol, I can take a walk, or I can ride my bike. I can do any number of things. It's not going to hugely impact me. And I think that's what's so important, just from a meditative perspective. And actually, I was saying to one of my friends this morning that I've been very derelict in my duty to self, in that I have not been keeping up with my practice the last couple of weeks. And I can see how much it affects my day-to-day work. Because instead of just enjoying things, I look at my list that I need to get through, and it all just becomes too much. And you go, oh, I'm never going to look at all the stuff I have to do, and I'm never going to get through all of this. And if you actually just took a moment to sit back and go, hang on, I can get through this. I am more than capable of figuring out how to get through this, then you absolutely can. But yeah, one of the things that I do want to ask you, Helen, that I don't really like to prepare questions for this, but this was the main one that I wanted to ask you. In regards to the retreat that you were just on, first of all, was it a silent retreat or just meditative practice throughout the day?
Well, there was some silence. We were like, we had an evening ritual, and then we'd go into silence overnight until after lunch the following day. So we had the mornings and the evenings in silence, and then we had a group discussion in the afternoon. But and there was one day when we were in silence for the whole day, and that was sort of the night after that was when the fire alarm went off. So it was quite, we're in silence, but we did talk a bit then because of what was going on.
Yeah.
But I have been on retreats where, you know, maybe the first day, because you're just getting acquainted, get to know each other, and then you go into silence for the whole week after that. But this one wasn't. It had a mixture. a mixture of both, and there's always lots of time, you know, for meditation, like in the mornings. I mean, I was cooking, so I didn't join in all the meditations, but also I just find, and we talked about this last week, it's like when I'm cooking, that's kind of like, it's part of my practice, because if I'm cooking at home, I've got other things going on, and I might sort of put the pot on, and then I'll go off and do something else, or put something in the oven and go and do something else. Whereas there, that's all you've got to do. All I've got to do is cook. I haven't got to worry about going to check my emails or making phone calls or whatever else I need to do. All I need to do is cook, and you can just be very present with that. And of course, it does take a bit longer because you're cooking for a lot of people, so there's you know, a bit more chopping of veg and things to do, but it's less stressful. And a lot of the I mean, the couple that were leading the retreat used to be the managers at the retreat centre, but they moved out a few years ago, because I've known them for years, and it was just really nice working with them, because it's like, because they feel they can relax, because, you know, if the retreatants are being fed well, then they know they're happy. And also, you know, and I mentioned this last time, I said, and also, because they said to me, oh, you keep a very tidy, ordered kitchen, and you're very calm. And I said, yeah, well, you have to, otherwise that energy is going in the food, and it's going to affect the energy of the retreat. So there's, because they said, oh, some people, they said, you know, the kitchen's a complete mess and there's stuff everywhere. And I said, well, that's a reflection of what's going on in your mind. I mean, my kitchen's not always like that at home, but then it's just me, and so I'm not too worried. But when you're cooking for a large amount of people, you have to be organised, and you've got to. I mean, at home, it doesn't matter when I eat, because it's, as I say, it's just me. But there, obviously, they have to stick to their schedule. The meals have to be ready at a certain time. So you've got to make sure that it's all ready by whatever time. Say lunch is at 1 o'clock. You've got to have everything ready by 1 o'clock for when they come in for lunch and things like that. So, sorry, I can't remember what the question. Oh, it was about silence and meditation and stuff. Yeah. So, and I think that, I mean, as I say, I've been doing that for about 10 years now, because it means that I get to go. It's a nice way of giving something back. And it means I get to go on more retreats than I would otherwise, because I can go volunteer there, and I get to hang out with great people, and switch off from the world for a week. And so it's all, I mean, it's the way I try to live my life in general anyway. It's like meditation just doesn't just happen on the cushion or whatever position you meditate in. It then sort of permeates out into your life. And like you were saying, that when you've missed a few days, you really notice it. And I get that too. I know, you know, or if I've missed a couple of days, or I hadn't been on retreat. And a lot of people were saying that last week for us, because I did a weekend at the end of July, but it's not quite the same as doing a whole week. The first time that for many of us since the pandemic, we've been on a retreat, and we've done stuff online, but it's not the same, you know, as being in the room with people. And of course, you know, you're doing stuff online, you're still looking at your screen, and there is potentially the other distractions. Oh, well, I could just quickly check my emails while I'm there. But there, even there's no signal, no phone signal where the retreat centre is anyway. So even if you wanted to put your phone on, you wouldn't get a signal. Although when I went into the woods, I took my phone with me because I wanted to use the timer, because obviously I had to be back to prepare the dinner, so I didn't want to be late. So I thought, well, I'll just use Insight Timer on my phone, but I forgot to put it in airplane mode, and I didn't have my glasses, and it was a new phone, and I'm trying, and it was going ping, 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 all these notifications. I'm like, oh no, quick, I want to get it. I don't want these, go away.
Isn't it so funny how that, cause you were talking about, you know, easing back out into society, and I noticed that if I go away on my own for a weekend, and usually what will happen is the first day I'll go, well, I'm just going to watch movies the whole weekend. And before I know it, I'm just sat in meditation and doing breath work for like 2 days. But then when you come out, like you say, then you switch your phone back on, or, you know, the radio goes on, whatever the case may be, and it's jarring. It's actually, you suddenly realize how much noise and harsh noise we put up with day in and day out, and we wonder why we're so stressed. It's just the most bizarre thing. But this then brings me to my next question, Helen. in terms of the meals that are prepared at these kinds of retreats, which I'm assuming are, well, actually, let me ask the question, let me not assume. Are they, in fact, designed and created in such a way to help support the meditators to not lose their meditative state and focus?
Well, yes, because they tend to be, they're very simple. So it's like we usually have soup for lunch, and then an evening meal, which is all plant-based. There's no meat or cheese or eggs or anything like that. They do have milk there for people to put in their tea and stuff, cow's milk, but all the meals are plant-based. And yeah, so I think that and I think, well, 2 days we had a dessert, but most days you don't have a dessert. So I think, having a simple diet, and that doesn't mean that there's not enough food. There's plenty of it. There's always loads. I always eat more on retreat than I do when I'm at home because there's loads of it. But it's all good, wholesome, healthy food. And I think, like we were saying before, that that helps as well. And I mean, I eat fairly well at home anyway. I mean, I like cooking, as we discussed before, but I know some people say, oh, I'm not really very good at preparing healthy meals for myself and things like that. And they feel like, oh, it's been like a good kind of reset. You're not eating any junk food or takeaways or anything like that.
Nothing heavy.
No. So I think, yeah, definitely that supports your practice, because you're not you're not eating any processed food, anything like that. So
Oh no, that just sounds actually so amazing, because when I think about my own practice, when I am sort of, really dedicated to it, I'll always try to make sure that beforehand I don't have anything heavy. So no heavy starches or anything like that in my diet. Light, lots of fruits, fresh vegetables, excuse me, lots of water, all that kind of stuff. Just to kind of keep the body energized and going, but not so heavy that when you're trying to sit and concentrate, all your energy is going into digesting the meal you just had, because then you're not going to get very far.
Yeah,
and I've also noticed, sorry, yeah, please continue.
Yeah, no, sorry, you carry on. I didn't realise you hadn't finished speaking.
No, I was just going to say that I've noticed that when I do have a meal, even if it's not a heavy one, but I maybe overeat, whatever the case may be, and I go into meditative state, I don't come out feeling as energized as I would normally. I'll sort of come out feeling like, oh, that was good, but it wasn't great. So that's just my little observation. But I'd love to hear your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and the way the program is designed is that that after the meals you tend to have a bit of a break, so you're not going straight back into meditating. So you get up early, meditate for 2 hours, and then have breakfast. So you start meditating at 7, then have breakfast at 9. And then there's a break, and then meditate before lunch, then a break in the afternoon, meditate before dinner, and then break after dinner, and then eat a ritual in the evening. That tends to be the general kind of way it works. But it's also nice because there's a lot of spaciousness around it as well. So you've got time to go for a walk, or just be in nature, just sit with a cup of tea in the garden or looking out the window, and it's just, but it's also quite interesting when you haven't got to do anything or be anywhere, you can really start to notice how your mind is looking for things to latch onto, and like how that you feel like, oh, I want to be busy, I want to do something. Because it's always interesting, especially when you're in silence. I kind of observe the other retreatants, because I'm in the kitchen, so you kind of see everything that's going on. Like you see all the people that are drinking lots of coffee, and the ones who you get more offers of help with the cooking, because people are looking for ways to distract themselves, and it's not, I'm not making any judgments there, because I do the same. So, but it's like becoming aware of that. It's like, well, why do I feel the need to want to go and chop vegetables? Is it because I genuinely want help, or am I looking for a way of avoiding being with what's going on for me internally with my thoughts or whatever? So it's about, not that there's, and like you were saying, you want to come home and just and just watch movies. And there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that, but it's like, what's the motivation behind it? Because of this retreat, there was a lot of, because the couple that were leading it, they do a lot of stuff with myth, and she makes puppets and things like that. So there's lots of storytelling, and they're saying that, that watching films, TV shows, series and things like that is just like, in the ancient time before they had TV, they would tell stories and things like that. It's just like modern storytelling. So, and we need stories, and so there's nothing wrong with sitting down and watching a film. I watched a few good films over the weekend, or two on a Saturday, one on a Sunday, and that's what I like to do in the evening. It's just like find a good film with a good storyline. And generally, I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and I love sort of relating that to the films, and also, it relates to our own life and our own processes. When we're coming up against the demons and the which we do, especially when you're on a retreat, they'll be there facing you because you can't run away from them. There's nowhere to go and hide or distract yourself. So I think that's really important that we allow ourselves time for things like that, because it's like, because of the way our society is now, especially in the West, very capitalist, we have to be productive, the economy and all this kind of thing, that there's almost like that we have that inbred kind of guilt if we just sit and do nothing, and we just sit and watch a film or read a book or just sit with a cup of tea, and we're not being busy, because that's kind of so ingrained in us, and it takes quite a lot of work almost to undo all of that and unpick that and just slow down. And like this morning, I woke up quite early, and then I fell asleep again, and I had some quite vivid dreams. And I think, and that's also important as well, because it's very healing. And afterwards, it felt like it was a very healing kind of sleep. And I might have even stayed in bed a bit longer if we hadn't been doing this. Who knows? But it's really important, to allow ourselves the time to just slow down. And that sort of links into what we were saying before about the seasons. Like in the northern hemisphere, we're going into autumn and then winter, where the earth is slowing down, and so we need to slow down too.
Oh, for sure. And you've brought up so many good points there, Helen, about, well, specifically not having anywhere to run, when you're in deep meditation and having to face those demons, because that is one of the major issues that I think the world has constantly, because of that harsh noise. We're constantly distracted. And I think that was one of the reasons why COVID had such a huge impact on people, the lockdowns, because you couldn't get your fast food anymore, right? So already you're forced to eat more healthily. So you're eating more, store-bought vegetables and that sort of thing, usually. And you're spending a lot more time on your own. You're not sort of being blasted by the radio and blasted by the TV and blasted by your boss. You just sat at home trying to sort through the day. And I had a lot of clients, myself included, who kind of went, "Oh, this is a lot to deal with." And yet that's actually what a meditation retreat does for you as well. It just pushes you into that space where, like you say, am I actually just chopping vegetables because I want to be helpful, or am I running away from something? And being mindful of those choices, I think, is so important always, and how they can impact us. And even when you said, there's nothing wrong with watching series or movies, it's if you find it helpful and you find it relaxing. But it's even better if you're able to use that time intentionally to really come back into yourself as well. So no, beautiful. This is just incredible. Did you have any major takeaways, if I may ask?
Well, I think yes, I did, and I'm trying to remember what I said. There was something I said when we were checking out at the end. Oh, this was going to be my biggest takeaway, and I can't remember what I said now. It was something to do with slowing down and just getting away from that, like the example I shared with like feeling that pull and I should go and buy some petrol. And when you're feeling like and you kind of when you feel like you're forcing things rather than being in the flow, because it rarely works anyway. And I think that was one of my biggest things, was just it's to have more allowing of just of the natural sort of process and evolution in our life. You know, I'm going through some personal stuff at the moment, and it's quite, you know, it's like there's that sense, oh, I just want all this to be over, you know, when things are challenging and things are difficult, rather than, well, the only way is through. I can't sort of push it away. You've got to go through it. And what you were saying about all the COVID and stuff like that, it was a bit like this petrol, sort of like it's like a mini version of that. What's been happening in the last few days. It's like when it was like, you know, I was just looking at this, it wasn't about the virus. It was just about people's fear of death, really. That's what kicked off. There wasn't really, you know, it was just basically a variant of the flu. But obviously people's fears were triggered by this, and also, again, not helped by the media. And so instead of like taking a step back and looking at, well, what are the actual figures here? The chances of dying from it are almost minimal. And okay, I mean, I think I had it. It wasn't very nice, but then the flu's not very nice. And as the Buddha said, you know, that was part of his awakening when he realised that sickness and death are part of life. You can't avoid it. So it's like, are you going to hide away for a year and a half because you're so afraid of dying, and yet you're missing out on a year and a half of your life? And I used to volunteer with a minibus. We used to take old people out shopping, and I was out one day at the supermarket during the pandemic, and I saw one of the ladies who was waiting for a taxi or something outside the supermarket. We had a chat, and she's just recently turned 90. And she said, oh, I really missed that. And I'm thinking, yeah, because when you're that age, or any age, it's like I would rather be enjoying these last few years of my life, because none of us know how much longer we've got left. So we want to be enjoying the time we've got, rather than thinking, oh, well, when all this is over, life will be better. But that's not how it works. Life is now. You know, the future's not guaranteed. We don't know what's going to happen. So, and it's like, you're more likely to die in a car accident, but that doesn't stop you going out and driving in your car. So it's kind of, yeah. And I think, like you were saying, people, you know, couldn't go out. They're perhaps working from home, and they were then being, they're being confronted, aren't they, then with those fears? And then you have that choice. Well, am I going to look at these fears, or am I just going to get some beers in and binge watch Netflix? So, and look at what's behind this.
I'm so glad you brought that up, specifically around, you know, are you going to lose out on a year and a half of your life, or are you going to give in to fear? And what I find so interesting is, before the pandemic, I was chatting to somebody who I just met, and he asks me this question randomly, out of the blue. The question was, would you choose to have the perfect body for, the perfect body for you, so your looks, everything is just perfectly in proportion, your body works absolutely perfectly, all the rest of it, but your lifespan is shortened by 20 years? And I looked at him, I said, no, absolutely not. And he goes, oh, well, I would absolutely take that. And it suddenly hit me that the world and the media really pushes this idea of fear and greed constantly. Because when he looked at me, he said, well, why would you not want to have that? You know, life would be so much easier if you did. I said, yes, but think about the 20 years of knowledge and wisdom that I'd be missing out on if I was to give that up for the perfect looks. And I could see it just did not compute for him. And then, starting to do the work that I do now, I suddenly started to realize, this is how the media gets us. They push on us that, you know, you have to look and behave and have certain things. And then it's so much easier from that greed perspective to then push the fear of you're going to lose it, you're going to lose it, you're going to lose it. And people will do absolutely anything in their power to keep what they supposedly think they have. Meanwhile, as you say, all we actually ever have is now.
Yeah.
We just have this present moment. And I think that's the most beautiful thing that meditation teaches us, that this is all that exists. There is nothing before, there is nothing after. It's only now. So, yeah.
And again, that's linked in with the fear of, sickness and death, that fear of aging and things like that, because of the way it's presented by the media. Oh, you have to get the anti-wrinkle cream, dye your hair. What was quite interesting, I noticed a lot of women, especially, I suppose, couldn't go to the hairdressers, so they were letting their hair sort of, they couldn't dye, they chose not to dye their hair, and then sort of starting to embrace the grey. And I thought, well, I did that quite a few years ago, because when I first started to go grey, I was only in my 30s, and I thought, well, this young. And but then I thought, well, now I'm in my 50s, it's okay. But yeah, you get caught into all of that.
You do. So as we start to wrap up, I'd like to pose a question to you, which hopefully we can discuss a bit further in our next session.
Yeah.
Because we've gone into a little bit about the human fear of death, which is essentially the fear of the unknown. And I think that's also why we see so many problems in the world today with diversity and inclusion, or the lack thereof. It's simply because we fear the unknown. So anything that is other, we don't want in our space, and death is the biggest unknown for a lot of people. Have you ever, whilst meditating, had any experiences around, I guess we could call it the other side, or what comes afterwards, or any sense of peace and calm or anything like that about what might be waiting for us once we die? And I don't want a full explanation, just a yes or a no.
Well, yes and no, probably not in the way that you expect.
Aha. Okay, well, that is the perfect setup that I could absolutely want.
Yeah.
So on our next episode, I'd love to do a deep dive onto that. Exactly what you mean by yes and no, and probably not in the way you mean. I like that. Good stuff.
Well, impermanence is one of my favorite topics. So there we go.
Oh, okay. Now I'm very excited. So we will be back with Helen in 2 weeks' time, I believe. I'll double check the schedules. So that would be October the 12th, if I am correct, but I will double check that, ladies and gentlemen. And we will be furthering our discussion on meditation. And this time will be around meditation and death, specifically. Helen, and to our audience, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us here on the Wellness Lifestyle Conference. We definitely look forward to having you again. And yeah, have a great day, I suppose.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Stefan, and I will see you all again in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye now.
Bye.